So I'm doing the Van Hiele levels and the geometry takeaways. And so the first part that I realized was that a lot of high school students get into high school and they are given a geometry class. And that is the main focus of this course. And they don't know how to take it. They don't understand what the course is even about because they never talked about shapes and geometry to finesse when they were in elementary grades. So now they're just frustrated and they're confused and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to prove, they don't know how to understand what angles and measurements and all these things are because it was never really discussed well for them and it was never really talked about in to finesse when they were in elementary grades. So this concept is talking about starting in the elementary grades like kindergarten, first, second grade, and going over the shapes and starting to talk about a lot of this when you're in the elementary grades and the elementary ages, because then when you get to high school, you're not so confused, you're not so overwhelmed, you're not so frustrated because you've already seen this. It's not completely new information. And so to start with is that to teach geometry, you have to have a deeper understanding of everything that's going on. So you have to have the visual recognition. You have to be able to draw the different shapes to accuracy. It can't just be a rectangle, but the rectangle has maybe rounded edges, so it almost looks like a circle just with a few angles to it. And then you have to see the relationship to the pictures and the shapes. So like a circle, you can tell is different than a rectangle, and you can see the relationship between them, that one has 4 sides and one does not have any sides. Or like octagons versus say a square, you know that the octagon has 8 sides and the square only has 4. Or the fact that a diamond is really just a square tipped on its side. So students have to be able to visualize that and they have to understand that. And I think that's really important for students to understand because then they're not as confused. And the next one is playing games that allows them to manipulate the shapes, that allows them to actually visualize what they should be doing and what they're wanted to do and what they're wanted to understand. By having those hands-on demonstrations, then it's a whole lot less confusing for them because so many kids are hands-on learners. They can't just look at a picture, they can't just look at words on a page and understand it. And the next thing is the abstraction of it, is that once they are able to move them and once they are able to play with these things, that they can now look at it on a piece of paper and they can see things. So having a square, a triangle, and a circle all together and still being able to figure out the angles of each because they have that understanding that these different angles can be represented together. And so having each level of understanding and of learning and just continuously working on these different things really helps students to be able to get into high school and understand what's happening. Another really cool thing that I saw was using real life expectations and real life things, like having the roof trusses. There's so many kids that would be more apt to look at a real world building and want to figure out what the angles are for that instead of, oh, well, we just have to know angles to know angles. And it really doesn't help them to understand anything because there's no reason for them to. There's no real world application for them to want to understand it. So I think that was a really big takeaway, is that when I was in school, we just learned the abstract version of it. We never really had the real world, why am I learning this? Because I think a lot of the students need the why am I learning this, not just, oh, well, I'm learning this to learn this. No, there's actually real reasons to learn it, and that maybe it's the houses, maybe it's the roofing, maybe it's learning about the farm and the different dimensions of the farm, or the different dimensions of a pasture, or different things like that, that makes it actually interesting for the student to want to learn these things. And so I think there's a lot of really cool information that would make students want to learn geometry and not be as confused and frustrated in the end.